Welcome back to Devdays 23. My name is Sam Frank. I'm a senior product manager here at Okta, and I'm going to be talking about the latest in identity technology, verifiable credentials. I'm going to be going over why we need a new credential standard or new identity standard in a world full of identity standards. I'm going to be talking about what is provided in the verifiable credentials standard. I'm going to be talking about who is using it today and how you can get your hands on it in the Auth0 Lab experimental instance. So let's get started. First, I have to talk a little bit about safe harbor. Verifiable credentials is an emerging technology. It's all future-facing, so all of this falls under safe harbor. So why do we need another identity standard in a world full of identity standards? Well, it's because we still have paper identifiers, like this one, my passport. Why do we still have these paper identifiers like IDs, diplomas, tickets that are in their paper form? Well, one of the things is scale. If you had to call to an OIDC server every single time a passport or an ID is used, that's a lot of load on a single server or a cluster. There's privacy. You don't want to tell the government every time you go to the pub. At least I don't. And so I want some standard that's able to be used in an offline-like way, where the issuer of the credential is not the one that's verifying the data in that credential every time it's used. I want to have it be used in an offline context if it needs to be, so that you can have a local data store for verification, so I don't need to have internet access. And I need something that users are going to trust with a high privacy standard. And that's interoperable, because if every single state, every single government, every single company issued a different type of credential, it would be a lot of work to implement. And this is affecting users' everyday lives. I know an instance where I wanted verifiable credentials. Last year, I had the honor of going down to Argentina to work with our Auth0 Lab team on verifiable credentials and Web3 technology. I was traveling from O'Hare, Chicago, where I'm based, Chi-Town boy, to JFK, to Buenos Aires, to Cordoba in Argentina. It was a long day of travel. It was a lot of stress. And it was right after the lockdowns. It was when you needed a proof of vaccination and a proof of a test within the last 14 days to get into Argentina. And so I had this data all on my phone. I had a PDF of my 14-day test. I had a picture of my vaccination card. I had my paper passport in my hand. And I got to O'Hare really early to make sure that I could get all this data to the airlines, because airlines really don't like when they take you to a foreign country and then you can't get into that country and they have to take you home. And so, to my surprise, Delta only required the passport from me. And so I get to JFK. I'm running through the airport because I'm not super familiar with JFK, trying to hit my connection from the local terminal to the international terminal. I'm worried about not making my flight. And I get to the Aerolíneas Argentinas desk, and they're like, well, where's your email from the government? What email from the government? And so I had missed, as a user, as many users do in the chaos of travel, that I was supposed to submit my vaccination card and 14-day test to the Argentinian government so they could send me an email, and that's what would let me on the plane as Aerolíneas Argentinas. So they said, don't worry, you can go over there, you can fill out the form, it's going to take 10 minutes, and then you'll get your email to be able to get in. Well, here I am with my phone in one hand, my passport in another, trying to fill out this government form, which, if any of you know government technology, it's always not the most well-implemented technology, especially when it's implemented in a rush for a pandemic. And so I enter my passport information by hand, the long passport number. I go and I look up where on my phone did I download that PDF for my 14-day vaccination or negative test information. And then I go back to the form and it resets my passport information because I left the application and I deprioritized the form, so I have to fill it back in. It took 5 times to fill out this form as the user. And I'm sitting there already worried about missing my flight. So I finally get my email from the government. I show it to the Aerolíneas Argentinas desk. I start running through JFK to get to my flight. It was delayed by 2 hours, so I made it. So it was all fine. But that user experience was one of the most stressful travel experiences I had. And it got me thinking, like, why can't I just upload a digital copy of my passport to the Argentinian government? Why can't I upload a vaccine record? Why can't I upload my proof that I didn't have COVID in the last 14 days? So these are the user experiences that are leading to us to want to digitize more and more of our credentials. And it's what the W3C was looking at when they created the Verifiable Credentials standard. So Verifiable Credentials as a technology is a standard. It was created by the World Wide Web Consortium. You can go read it online. It's a W3C recommendation now. It's been adopted by other standard bodies as well. The OpenID Foundation is working on it. The Decentralized Identity Foundation is also working on it. And these standard bodies are trying to figure out, what happens when I present this credential to people? How do I verify the authorship and the provenance of this credential to know that it wasn't intercepted or it's not being presented by someone I don't trust? All these questions are being figured out in these standards, and it's a lot to have to go and implement yourself. And that's what we're here for, is to make it easy. So let's talk a little bit about who is involved in a verifiable credential. First, there's the issuer of the credential. This is the institution that you trust to make the claims. This would be like the government for my passport, right? You trust the State Department to issue the claims about a US citizen going abroad. It might be an employer for employment credentials, whether it's proof of employment or an employee badge. It might be an educational institution that you got your diploma from or a certification from. These are all issuers in verifiable credential land. Then there is a subject and a holder. They're often the same person. So if you think about a diploma that I got, I will have access to it. I am the subject of that diploma. I also hold on to that diploma. But these are not necessarily the same person. You can think of great examples. You don't want to give your 3-year-old their social security card on a phone. You don't want them to have a phone in general. And so sometimes you need to separate the holder and the subject of a credential. And so the parent would be the holder, and the subject would be the kid. And then finally, you need a verifier, someone who actually wants to take this information in, verify its authenticity, and then use it to make business decisions. And so this could be someone at a counter selling alcohol, wanting to make sure that you're over 21. This could be the Argentinian government, making sure that I have all my credential information to get into the country. That's a verifier for a verifiable credential. And so the way that it works is issuers issue credentials to holders, and those holders send presentations to the verifiers. All of them are working with a verifiable data registry. A verifiable data registry is just somewhere that holds the public keys for the different parties involved. So any cryptography on the internet, you want a public-private key pair. The issuer is signing the credential with their private key in order to show that they were the ones who authored it. The holder is signing the presentation of that credential with their private key to show that they were the ones who are actually sending it. This allows you to use verifiable credentials over the internet, which is better than most of the digital credential standards like MDL that don't have a presentation standard like verifiable credentials do. And then finally, the verifier is getting that request and checking those keys to make sure that people are who they say they are. Now, verifiable data registries, they can be in a few different places. They can be on a website, like a government website, or maybe we could host one as Okta. Or they can be on a public blockchain if you trust the address of that blockchain user. You just need somewhere to reference to get that public-private key pair. And so let's talk a little bit about how these are, or who is using these today. Right now, healthcare is a big use case. The only verifiable credential that I have that is actually valid in the wild is a vaccine card. I got it just a few weeks ago, not when I was going to Argentina, but just a few weeks ago from my hospital system, which uses Epic as a records management system. So now Epic is issuing vaccine cards as verifiable credentials that I'm storing in my Google Wallet. Yes, I'm an Android user. I'm turning all your chat screen. And so we have Google and Apple both agreeing to bring verifiable credentials into their wallets, able to be used by developers for different systems. We have employment credentials. Workday did an early beta in 2019 of issuing credentials. And right now, you might have seen LinkedIn is doing proof of employment, giving you a blue check mark, which everyone is obsessed with these days, to verify your employer. That is using Microsoft's Entra verifiable credential system. We see different government use cases. All these links will be provided after the presentation, so you don't need to try to figure out what those URLs are. But if you Google verifiable credentials and the Ontario government, you'll get the Ontario government's government website about their use cases for verifiable credentials, as well as New South Wales. And the EU is working on verifiable credentials with their EBC blockchain initiative. And finally, education. We know that there is a deployment on mycreds.ca of 69 higher education institutions that are trading different certifications and credentials online, as well as the Digital Credentials Consortium, which is 12 higher education institutions in the US and EU, including MIT. So let's get our hands on this, right? Let's try it out. I'm going to go over how to use these as an end user and see the end user experience. I'm going to show you how to issue credentials from the Auth0 Lab tenant so you can start issuing your own credentials that can get used by others. And then I'm going to do an overview about how to set up verification, but you're going to have to do that on your own. But don't worry, we've got great documentation. I wrote it myself, so I know it works. And you can try that out on your own time. So let's dive in. But first, a quick note. This is all on the Auth0 Lab instance. Auth0 Lab is our R&D team that's working on emerging identity technology. You can find their work at lab.auth0.com. You can follow all of their experiments, but they are experiments. They're not meant to be used in production. Please don't put production data in this instance. Please don't put PII in this instance. I'm going to repeat that a few different times as I show you and walk you through it, but it's important to note because this is all experimental. All right, so I'm going to go over here. I'm going to show you how to set up and access the super secret Auth0 Lab instance. It's actually pretty easy. The first thing that you need to do is just set up an Auth0 account. So this is just auth0.com, right? This is just our normal sign in. You just need to have any type of Auth0 account. You don't need to be an enterprise subscriber. You don't need a pro subscriber. Any Auth0 account. The hardest part about getting access to the Auth0 Lab tenant is creating a password for your Auth0 account. You got to do it. It's got to be unique. Don't reshare a password. It's got to be 100% unique just for this. But what we're doing behind the scenes is we're using your Auth0 account to establish authenticity in the Auth0 Lab instance. And so you just need any old Auth0 account. So I had to create my super secret password, meeting all of our super secret password requirements. Any configuration of a regular Auth0 tenant will do in order to access this, so just pick any options that work for you. If you end up wanting to use this tenant, maybe select the ones that are going to be for your use case, but this is not the tenant that you're going to use to access verifiable credentials. But notice the UI, just the way it looks, because I'll show you the differences just to make sure you know that you're in the Auth0 Lab tenant. I'm going to go up to the URL, and I'm going to change it from manage.auth0.com. I know it's a little bit small. Don't worry, this will get posted online. To manage.auth0lab.com. That's the only change, just a different base URL. And that's going to give you access to the super secret Auth0 Lab stuff. Don't tell our competitors where it is, because it's all going to come soon. So this is just continue with my Auth0 account. It's going to log you in. The first time you go in, we're going to tell you, hey, big bold letters, red. This is an experimental instance. Do not put production data in here. Do not put PII in here. Once you make the lawyers happy by agreeing to the free terms for that, you can get in and try the new experimental features. And remember how I said the UI looks a little bit different? So this is going to be the Auth0 Lab UI. Looks very similar to the base UI. Got the same toolbar, but with a few more options on the left. But notice how we have a reset timer. Every once in a while, we rebase the code in order to bring all of the new Auth0 base features into Lab, and we reset and get rid of your data. So again, do not put production data in here. But that's how easy it is to get access to this account. So let's see what we can do with it. Videos are always the hardest in a slide deck. And we're going to go on. All right, so this is the next video that we have. We're going to use our credentials information, but we're going to access the documentation first, which I said is really good because I wrote it. And so this is going to show you how to use credentials in the Auth0 Lab instance. This is the Auth0 Lab documentation. You're not going to find this in the regular documentation if you go to our normal documentation site. But it's going to give you an overview, some of the things that we talked about earlier around verifiable credentials. It's going to give you access to verifiablecredentials.dev, which is a whole explainer that's publicly accessible of verifiable credentials. And then it's going to show you how to use credentials as an end user. And so we have a Discord server that you can come and talk to us if you run into problems. But I'm going to go to our wallet. So this is our developer wallet at wallet.verifiablecredentials.dev. This is where we're going to store our credentials. It's a developer wallet. Don't put PII in here. Don't use it as a production wallet. But I'm going to go to obtaining a credential, follow the instructions, which just say hit the big button right in the middle. Very easy to follow. And that's going to show you what issuers we've already built into the developer wallet. So these are different mock institutions. I'm going to click the vaccine record. And this would be the sign-in for your hospital system. So you can see the URL up there is atlantishospital.auth0lab.com. I'm going to go ahead and mock sign in to what would be my healthcare provider. And this is going to give me access to the data within my healthcare provider that will populate my vaccine credential. So this is not logging into the back end. This is logging into the hospital systems website. Big part about verifiable credentials is putting the user in control. And so I'm going to go ahead and accept the terms. It's going to load my credential into the wallet, which I can expect. This is a hard-coded credential, so even though it says Susan Doe, I did sign in as my own email address. But here's the data behind the credential. You can see that I have an Ethereum address that we create for the user. That's the decentralized identifier for the user. You can see the different signatures within the credential, the JWT at the end that signs the entire credential, so you can establish that Atlantis Hospital was the one who issued it. And now the user has this to be able to show if they ever needed to get into Argentina with last-minute notice at the airport. I would just be able to quickly show that presentation. So let's see what we see as a developer when someone presents a credential. And so here I have my vaccine record again. And I'm going to go ahead and just click it. We've created an easy flow so you can see the payload data. So once you're in that wallet and you have a credential, I'm going to try the presentation flow. This is the verifiablecredentials.dev website, which comes with a couple tools. This is the presentation tool that we're going to use in a second, but I'm going to show you what the website looks like. This goes over everything I'm talking about now. So if you missed anything, if I went too fast, then you can come here and explore the individual use cases. You can see what type of data you could expect in different credentials. And you can see the different types of people and cryptographic proofs in the credential. You can get more information how they work. And if you want to join our community or see the documentation that I was presenting earlier, it's there. And then if you want to join our community, you can head to join the community and have a conversation. I'm in there. If you want to say I went too fast during this presentation, you can find me there and let me know. But I'm going to head back to the presentation tool. This is the presentation JSON that I'm going to send over to Wallet. It's really just asking for, do you have a vaccine card? And so the wallet is going to use this URL that I'm about to click on, and it's going to look if it has a vaccine card in it, which of course I just gave myself. And so it's going to see it there. It's going to ask the user, hey, verifiablecredentials.dev wants this credential. Do you want to send it to them? Yes, I do. And then it's going to send it over. So let's look at what that looks like as a developer who's now getting this payload. I get the standard information of a presentation of a JWT plus some additional information. These are all clickable, so we're going to go in and explore this. This audience information is the audience of verifiablecredentials.dev. And this, although verifiable credentials don't have an audience, the presentation does. So this presentation is meant for this address, which we saw in DidIon. The issuer of the presentation, again, this is the presentation of the verifiable credential, is the user. And so we saw the Ethereum address when I first created the credential. Here's the Ethereum address again of the user. And then finally, what's in the actual credential itself? This is the JSON payload for the JWT that is the credential. You'll see all the different credential information that we saw in the wallet, including Susan Doe and Atlantis Hospital. And you'll also see who the credential subject is here, which you'll notice that same Ethereum address. It ends in C4. It's a long string. If you can't see it, you can always look at it when we post it online. But you'll be able to see that that subject is the same DID as the issuer of the presentation. So now in this case, I know the holder and the subject are the same person. And so if that matters to you in your business logic, you can say, OK, proceed, versus if the subject and holder are different people, you might want to do additional business logic. So that was all in the presentation data for the verifiable credentials. And that could have been how easy it was for me to upload my vaccine record to the Argentinian government. Unfortunately, it was a lot more complicated than that. So now we're going to see how to become an issuer of verifiable credentials. You can issue any type of credential you want to. This is a little bit more technical. This is, again, the documentation for that is just at auth0lab.com/docs. If I go too fast and you miss something, all of it is reviewable here. And then we also have the Discord server if you get lost during the presentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and set up my issuer of a verifiable credential. Again, if you need help, I'm in the Discord server, ready to answer your questions, and the engineering team is as well. So I'm going to go to my manage.auth0lab.com instance. I set up a specific tenant for this, and so it's good to always note the tenant ID up in the upper right-hand or left-hand corner up there, Devdays 23. I'm going to head over to the Credentials tab, which has that big lab, so you know it's some of the experimental code in the Auth0 Lab tenant. I'm going to use my documentation. I'm going to pull it to my super secret screen off to the left and use it to reference because I don't remember everything offhand. And I'm going to head to credential issuance and create the bones of my verifiable credential. When I create a verifiable credential type, this is important because this is what I'm going to reference internally in my code. And then the name is what's going to get presented to the user. And so pick, it's the hardest thing of anything is to name something. And so pick a good name. So we're going to create an Acme University degree. Now that the credential template is created, this is like the bones in the Auth0 system. So I'm going to head to Actions in order to flesh out what data is going to be there. I'm going to pick a verifiable credential issuance action, which is only available in the Auth0 Lab tenant. And I'm going to go and I'm going to create a custom action. Now this is just going to be about gathering data from the user in order to issue the credential. And so I'm just going to call it gathering credential data. This name does not matter nearly as much. It's just an internal reference for your actions list. It generates an action with a lot of code. There's also some sample code off in the documentation that I'm pulling off from the left hand of the screen and bringing on. And our documentation just lets you drop it in as an example. But let's go over it really quickly. It's saying that if I issue a credential type that's a university degree credential, go and look at the user app metadata and pull in their degree. Pretty simple. Look at their degree type and look at their degree name for that university degree credential. This is how you pull in specific user data for every time you issue a credential, so that you make sure you get their proper type and their proper degree name. And I'll show you how to set that up on the user side as well in a minute. But this is what's going to bring that data into the credential. I'm going to go ahead and grab my custom action. I'm going to drop it in the verifiable credential issuance flow and apply it. That's how easy it is to pull user data into a credential in the Auth0 system. Great example of credential code. So I'm also going to change some settings. This is the settings tab in the general client. I have to set up OIDC dynamic application registration. If you miss any of these things, they're in the step-by-step documentation. This is important for just connecting the wallet application to my Auth0 Lab tenant. I also need to go to my database connection and enable third-party access, again, so that wallet can go and grab data from my connection. Normally, these connections are off. They were on because I cut this video like 5 times, and so I forgot to do that change to begin this video again. Once those are set up, and I have my tenant configured so that a third-party application can come, I need to set it up in the issuer section of the wallet. This is under settings. I just need to make sure that my tenant, devdays23.auth0lab.com, is in the trusted issuer list. So this is make sure that my wallet knows how to go find that credential. And since it's already set up in my tenant that you can see there, devdays23, devdays23 over there, I can go back to my credentials and now I've got my Acme University degree that's in my wallet. But it's kind of a basic degree. I want to go make sure that it looks and feels like my university. And so I'm going to, first I'm going to create a user for my university before I do the look and feel. I'm going to create Susan, who is a graduate of Acme University. Again, the hardest part about this is creating a unique password that I cannot reuse anywhere for her. It's got to be meeting all password requirements, and that doesn't always work, so I'm going to have to go delete a few characters and come back. You can see how many times I've practiced walking through the video. Once I have my password set up for my new user, we talked a little bit when I created that action about pulling in degree data. And so I've got to create the degree data in Susan's profile. And so I'm going to head down to app metadata, which is how I built the action previously. And I'm going to add in the degree information. We have a sample degree set of information in the documentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that in app metadata. So there I have Bachelor of the Arts of Awesomeness, which is just everything. You don't need an actual subject if you're just awesome. And so now that degree information is in Susan's profile, able to be pulled into the verifiable credential when I issue it. So now I'm going to do the branding for the credential. I want to make sure Acme University has a good look and feel, and that when Susan gets her degree, she knows it's from Acme University. So I'm going to pull in a unique color. I'm going to pick bright red, because why not? I feel like a nice flashy color for Acme University. And then white text for the credential as well. This looks like fake university colors, but I'm sorry for anyone who's from Ohio State. That is actually your color scheme. And then the last part of it is making sure the display data that I actually show to the user shows up. This gets quite complicated. It's very specific JSON. We have a Learn More button under the display data, but we have example code in the documentation that you can pull in to set up an example. If you want to create your own credential, I highly recommend you go to Learn More. But this just has, the sample code I'm pulling in has a university degree, which might help the user find their credential and explore the university, as well as some fallback information, and making sure that I have the degree type and the degree name in that set of fields. So I'm going to save that data. So now I have user-facing data for my credential. And then I'm going to go try it out. And so we have a try issuance flow that creates a QR code. So you could actually scan that with your phones right now really quickly to get the credential. Or I'm just going to click the link, and it's going to head over to ID Wallet. It's saying that, hey, you're about to request a credential from this tenant. Are you sure you want to do that? And then it's going to have you sign in. This was similar to where I signed into Atlantis Hospital before. This is like signing into Acme University. And so the university wants to make sure that they're about to issue the credential to the right person. So I'm going to type in that super secret password that I did earlier. I'm going to hit continue. It's going to ask the user, hey, do you really want to let this organization access your wallet? I'm going to say yes. And now I have my bright red degree credential. But also, you notice it says John Doe instead of Susan. The Bachelor of the Arts, though, is right. So the Bachelor of the Arts, awesome. Why didn't it pull in the user's name? So I'm going to accept this credential, but I'm going to go explore why my implementation didn't work. I'm going to go and explore the different data in the credential, and then I'm going to head back to my instance to figure out, why did I say John Doe instead of Susan, who was the user that I created. I'm going to head down to my, oops, the display data didn't quite work. Oh, that's weird. Well, it is experimental, so not everything. I'm going to go try to turn it off and turn it back on again by refreshing the page and see what happens. All right, it worked. It was just a refresh. Don't worry about it. We'll work on it in the future. But I look back and I see this fallback information. I had John Doe as a family name for my fallback information. So maybe that explains why John Doe got into the credential, because if I don't have any data for a name, then it defaults to John Doe. But what happens if I want to put Susan in as the credential name? What would I have to do? Does anyone know? Anyone take a guess? Everyone was following really closely, right? Well, so I'm going to head back to my action after looking at my credential data. I'm going to go back to the flow that I created earlier. So this is just my library of custom actions. Remember, we had that gather credential data. I'm going to relook at this data, and I realize, oh, I only pulled in a degree type and a degree name. I didn't pull in a username. And so there's no family name, there's no first name in that. And so if I want to do that, I have to change the action code, and then I'd have to go to users, and I'd have to update Susan's information. Either the user data, but she could probably change what her name says if she wants to change her first name to Suze or something, and then app metadata. And that's what would change the credential data. So that is just how you create a credential. Took 10 minutes to set up in our instance. There's documentation on how to do it online. If you wanted to become a verifiable credential issuer tomorrow, you could do that if you wanted to. And so last but not least, I'm going to show you a quick overview of verifying credentials. Don't worry, we're not implementing anything. You don't have to follow along. I know I'm going fast. But it's important because this is the most technical of the labs that we have for verifiable credentials. You actually create a client that is going to pull in the credential, and then you clone the GitHub repo, and we walk you through how to do that and how to set up polling, so you see if the user actually sent the credential in, if they've accepted the terms, and then you can use that data in your system to make different business decisions. And if you couldn't follow along with everything I said, because I went really fast, and it's very technical, you can head to lab.auth0.com, which will get you started on any of the different experiments of the Auth0 Lab. You can head to verifiablecredentials.dev, which does a better version of explaining everything I just talked about here. You can go to Twitter and follow Auth0 Lab for new experiments. We have examples of how to hook up your Okta CIC instance to this to issue credentials with employee data if you wanted to. And we have the Discord where you can find me and complain, or compliment the presentation and talk to any of the engineering team about your specific use case. If you do want to use verifiable credentials in production, either reach out to sales or go to this Discord and talk to us about your use case, and we'll be happy to help you. Thanks, everybody.